Hey guys, what is up? AwesomeTheSauce here. Hope you guys are having a great day and welcome to another test run video. I was not actually planning on making a test run video until the stream last night, where I realized that there was a lot of changes in test run that were not readily apparent. Now, this is something that, honestly, it is very, very hard to give feedback on. There's no patch notes on this. This was literally just something you entered into PvP with and you experienced it for yourself. So there's three different things that have completely changed PvP this week. And honestly, to be honest, I think, you know, outside of all the cards that have changed, outside of all of the TC bans, these are the real changes that are going to affect PvP in my opinion, and that's why I wanted to make a video on it. So the first of the three changes, and I think this is my favorite change so far, this is something that I saw and I noted. Maycasts do not cast at the same rate that they used to, and I don't know how else to tell you this, but like literally if you have like an aura pet and you're in test run, right, it's very hard to use numbers for this because there are no numbers, I guess. But let's say you have a pet like this, right? Little Storm Sniper Galvanic pet. The Galvanic, yes, it might cast, but if you have any way of casting a Galvanic yourself, which basically Storm does in this update with Stormwing, then the extremely, extremely lowered cast rate on Galvanic almost makes it not worth the pet talent. Now, here's the thing. This isn't to say that Maycast Furnace, Maycast Reliquary, all of these Maycasts are unbelievably, you know, they're never going to be a thing in PvP. Like, I think people will use these, but now you're really going to want to capitalize when you do get one, because the odds that you get more than one in a full 30-minute game are actually low, I think. That means that if you're gonna put a whole pet slot to this, you better make use of it when it happens. These damage auras, especially, how they used to work is that you would literally just cast a bubble, or in the case of how it used to be for Storm, but it is for a lot of other schools, you would do something very small that breaks future shields, like an overtime, like a lightning elf, for example. And as soon as you got that overtime and the damage aura, all you would really need to do is strike and hit and you would win the game. It was an incredibly cheesy way of winning the game. I'm really happy that they did lower the cast rate on these. I think that it's going to make a really massive difference. This is a change that I don't know exactly what they did, but whatever they did seems to work, because you will not be able to reliably get a damage aura. I would say the same about Brace and Fortify, but I haven't really used those as much, but I'd assume that all Maycast auras are now much, much harder to get reliably. And I think, you know, as a part of this, like, you know, conversation about what a Maycast really should be, right? I think the devs are on the same page on this, and a lot of people probably agree with this. A Maycast shouldn't be a game winner. It should be something that still allows for a player that's playing badly to beat a good player. There should still be the occasion where even if you're playing really, really well, a bad player or someone who's maybe behind on tempo, they do have a chance to recover. It keeps excitement alive in PvP. It keeps the tempo, you know, still up in the air sometimes. And the fact that this isn't so pervasive makes me think that this is probably one of the best changes that they put out in test round. From my experiences last week and the week before, Maycasts were really the sore thumb to me out of every change. So I think this is the best thing that they could have done. I really, really feel that way. Again, I don't know how this changes between Fortify, Brace, and damage auras. All I know is that as far as damage auras go, the cast rate are they're extremely low. Now, I don't think this is actually the end of damage auras in the meta. What I do think is that people will go after more creative solutions, and that's really exciting. I think one thing that might happen, the Uber Boots, which gives 6-round auras. That's right, that's a 6-round Sleet Storm you're looking at. These might be very, very popular now, because 6 rounds, it's almost better than a Maycast. Like, if you overtime into this, bro, and then you bubble as they shield, like schools with overtimes and the 6-pip, they could do a lot of damage, and it could be a very interesting way to play the game. It should be a very interesting setup. I will note that some of these are very, very hard to make and very, very hard to get as a drop, so make sure that you check out the recipe shop. You can actually see all of these. They're all delightful boots, and basically, especially if you're ice or life, the only way to get the boots that give 2 copies of the 6-round auras is to craft it. So good luck, y'all. Yo, the 20 caramel chunks, good luck. I'm still working on it. So that's one really positive change. It's my favorite change this week of all. But let's get into things that I think are a little bit more dicey. So yesterday, I was rocking 131 shadow pips, right? And this is really interesting because this is like pretty much the maximum shadow rate that most people can even rock. And what I was struck by was how slow the shadow pip gain is. Now, I don't know if you guys watched the round table, but they are trying to slow down the meta. And it makes a lot of sense to look at the shadow gauge as a way of doing it, right? You don't want people absolutely just spamming shads over and over and over again. And what's interesting is the number that's, again, this is a number that I'm getting from Ratbeard. He was in the chat and he was actually very helpful, even though I was very frustrated at the lack of information. But basically, he was talking about how it's probably closer to around 6 rounds for a shad. Now, I don't know what the 6 round number refers to, unfortunately, because technically your shad rating is also based on your opponent's shad rating. But what I would assume is that if you're rocking gear without shad rating, like turquoise, right? What I would assume, as a rule of thumb, don't quote me too hard, is that in order to get a shad, you'll probably have to wait 7 rounds if your opponent has an extra piece of gear with shad rating. And if both of you have maximum shad rating, like around 130, then you should expect around 6 rounds. Now, these numbers are probably very, very, I don't know, they're probably malleable. What I will say is that on the fire, when I was running turquoise robe, I was getting approximately, like, you know, like 14 to 15% of a shad every round. So if you do the math on that, that's around 6 to 7. So 6 to 7 rounds for one shad is actually, it's really good, I think, in some ways, and really bad in other ways. It's good in the sense that, like, if you're a school that needs to play defensively, like Life, you just got the greatest update ever, right? I mean, you can set up for heals now, you can shield like crazy. The damage spikes from shadow spells, they just really aren't a thing. Shadow Strike probably now is borderline useless, because if you hop into it, you might get dispelled into the stun, and that's gonna give you 20% lash anyways. And when you're in here, the odds of you doing this early and getting another second shad and strike, they're very, very low, because think about it, right? Let's say you get a shad on round 7 or round 8, and you jump in a strike on round 10, you're still probably not going to get the shad if it took you that long to get the first shad during the 3 rounds of strike. That means the meta has slowed a lot. And what I noticed is that I think what this might mean anyways, and this is just a theory, a prediction, what might happen is that schools are probably going to move away from higher shad rating, and they're probably going to need resist. So I think the Dragoon hat, even though it might make sense right now for Fire, Myth, maybe even Storm to rock, I really doubt that this is going to be as good. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to be extinct. I'm sure there are ways to play around this. I'm sure there are ways to, especially on a Storm, I'm sure there are ways to play with the Dragoon hat anyways. But I think because, you know, the only difference between this and the Malster hat, for example, right? When you're thinking about shads, it's only 3 shad rating, and considering that you're going to be waiting 6 to 7 rounds, the effect of actual shad rating, like it used to be, is much smaller, right? Because you're still going to be waiting a very long time. So I think giving up a little bit of shad rating, a little bit of health for resist, that's probably going to be very important. So I would assume that Malster hats might make a comeback as well. And finally, if you go into test room, you'll notice that the Daredevil rings, even the level 100 versions, do not have Pierce anymore. So if there was any confusion about whether that was intentional or not last week, it was not intentional. They all should not have Pierce. So those are the 3 big changes, and what you might notice, especially if you consider damage aura cast rates and the shadow gauge, there is a significantly more defensive meta now. I'm really curious on how this is going to unfold. As someone who's very accustomed to how things are right now, I'm totally a fish out of the water. I'm going to just be honest. I might not be the source of good info for what's good in PvP for a little bit, but what I'm mostly concerned about more than anything is life and balance. The schools that can heal really, really well. I think those schools, especially with this latest update, I feel like those schools became powerful to the point of unbalance. Life especially, I guaranteed you this is what's gonna happen. Now that you don't need a Daredevil ring, Life has lots of rings that give insane healing, so they're gonna get a healing boost. And the Darkmoor decks, now I have a square one here because I was stupid and I crafted a square slot one, but you can make a triangle slot version of this. What you might notice is that you can carry 10 copies of life spells. Now this isn't a bad thing because you are giving up other stats, but with this with this deck, what you could theoretically do, and I assume a lot of people will be doing it, is you can just run something like this. And when you run something like this, and you also still have hidden bubbles, right? you could theoretically run 30 cards that can change the bubble, and no other school now can fight you for this except Death, and even when they're fighting you for it, they'll be using Doom and Gloom. So considering there's less Pierce, less Shads, and also less damage aura Maycasts, I feel like Life might just be able to heal like crazy. Now, will that mean that if they keep healing, that the timer will always make them lose against defensive schools, and they'll always be able to outlast offensive schools? Time will tell. What I do think is that if Life is forced into healing, what I think might happen is people will see one Satyr and they'll just be like, oh, he healed? We're just going to play for timer now, because once you heal, Diego's going to say no. So this is all like a discussion of ideas, not really a complaint, because I'm very unequipped to actually give solutions to this, but I'm curious as to the role of Life and maybe even balance if they choose healing strategies and how that's going to affect Diego timers and how people play around the timer. Yes, the meta is very defensive now, but is the timer going to get in the way of people really sinking into it, right? Is it even worth, for example, packing infections if just the person healing against you makes them lose in the long run, right? So I do think there are questions to ask about that too. I try to be pretty unbiased because I'm starting to realize that there's a lot of play styles that I'm very, I'm not used to yet. So I don't want to say that this is a very bad update. I will say that the Elf update yesterday with Storm, along with these 3 changes, makes Storm a very, very subpar school. All you really have to do is set shield spam against them, and honestly, they have such little health that even if a Life heals against them, they can also out-damage them after. There's a lot of problems with Storm at the moment, but I would say the other 6 schools will thrive in a defensive meta. They all have tools to succeed, so we'll see. Maybe Storm will just be the L in this meta for a little bit, but I definitely think this is going to be the most interesting and most strategic meta that we've ever had in a while, especially just because of the Maycast change. What do you guys think of this update? Are you guys frustrated like me on some schools? Are you enjoying it? Is this what you've been waiting for? I'd love to hear everyone's opinions. Let me know if you actually experienced this, because there's no update notes on the Shadow Gauge Maycast. None of these changes, these are just my experience, to be honest. That's what I'm going off of. Let me know what y'all's opinions are, y'all. Drop a like if you enjoyed. Leave a sub if you're new. There's tons of links in the description, including my Twitch, my Twitter, my Discord, my Instagram, and of course my Patreon. And as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. So stay awesome. And yeah.